Welcome to the Creatives with AI podcast. I'm your host, David, and this is a show where we share insights about the future of artificial intelligence and how it will affect the lives of people working in the creative industries. Now, I know we normally focus on creatives, but this time we have something a bit different for you. On today's show, we chat with retired Rear Admiral Alex Burton, where we touch on the role of the military in defending Western values and how AI fits into those strategies, how the events in Eastern Europe and Ukraine have highlighted the importance of national security, and how AI can enhance the military capabilities and the ethical considerations that come with its use. Alex is a retired Rear Admiral from the UK's Royal Navy, whose final appointment was as the Commander, United Kingdom Maritime Forces. That's the Royal Navy's senior seagoing fighting admiral. He commanded 3 warships on operations across the globe, established the Royal Navy's Innovation Center, and led the acquisition of several major programs. After leaving the service in 2017, Alex started his second career within the tech startup world, and until recently was a director of a transatlantic artificial intelligence and machine learning software company that was founded to exploit the power of data for advantage in defense and security. As always, links to Alex's profile and social media will be in the show notes on our website at creativeswith.ai. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this enlightening conversation with Alex. Alex, thanks for coming on today. We're really excited to have this conversation. I think there's a lot of interesting topics that we could delve into. The first question, though, that I really want to ask you before we get into any of the detail here is how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. But it's very kind of you, David. I'm well. I'm enjoying the end of a wet London spring, and life is returning to greenness again. But no, I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. So the first thing that comes to mind, and I think we talked about this a little bit before the podcast, was maybe just give a little bit of background sort of for the listeners on what the purpose of the military is and their sort of role in defending our Western values, if you want to call it that, and how that then feeds into, or how AI then feeds and fits into that.
Yeah, sure. It's a really interesting question, because to anyone that's served or anyone that sits within government, it's sort of a question that doesn't really need to be asked, let alone answered. But I in my late 50s, and that sort of gives me sort of 2 reasons to realize that it is a question that needs to be asked. One is I've got children who've grown up since the Cold War, and whereas my early stage of my career was during the Cold War. They've grown up since the Cold War, and the sort of conflicts that they've seen our country involved in are conflicts that have had a tangential reference to their own safety and our own national security. And I think there's no doubt that tangential reference rather than direct reference has made it quite difficult for those conflicts to be completely justified to the entire population. And by association has made it quite difficult for the military to be justified. Now, the tragedy of the last 18 months in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, I think has made answering that question more easy. When you have a country that is illegally invaded, that's a tautology. When you have a country that has been invaded by an autocratic state against their wills, then it's quite easy to understand why you have a military. But I do think that the general public still feel that that's a long way east. It's a long way from the shores of Dover, and therefore, why do we have a military of the scale that we do? So, I haven't answered your question. I think justified why I think it's a really credible question. The reason we have defense forces and military, but other agencies as well, that protect our security is because we've got to be able to act, or be able to be credibly prepared to act more effectively than our adversary. And I can bring to life who those adversaries are, and they range from those that are acting on our soil, and Russia has acted. We mustn't forget, Russia has acted on the UK soil, but there are also people that want to steal our intellectual property, that want to compromise the manner in which what I describe as global commons are used. And maybe I can sort of unpack that a little bit more later. But those countries include China, they include North Korea, they include Iran. So there are countries that wish us to be less free than we currently are, that don't believe in the international rules-based system. And that's why we have security services and military.
David is very glass half full. As am I. I'm an optimist and I love technology, but I'm very cautious, because and so we're a good balance of people to talk to in that way, because I'm always putting my hand up saying, what if? And David's like, it's great.
Yeah. I think those are the sort of perfect yin and yang, aren't they? And actually, if you look at where AI is playing out in government, but here we're talking about defense, I think you've got exactly the same tensions, haven't you, between those that see all the benefits, see transformative for good from AI, and those that see some of the risks associated with it. And, dare I say it, and of course, I think I sit with David here as being the optimist. One of the challenges of introducing any form of technology into government, but particularly defense, is that they're naturally conservative to it. So you almost have to be a driven optimist to deliver that change, but just make sure you've got the ethics and the explainability behind it.
And what about, I'm aware that the United Kingdom certainly is ethical, but I guess there's a question around whether other countries that pose a risk will take that approach.
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear that you have, and it's not binary, but you've got a collection of countries that believe in the international rules-based system, believe in how what I would describe commons are owned by everyone and with sort of light touch regulation. Those might be the sea, it might be space, it might be cyberspace. You could call those, although it's a slightly stale statement, those sort of Western aligned countries. And you've got countries that have a far more autocratic system, which does not obey and conform to the international rules-based system. And I think the last 18 months that's been brought into visceral focus with Ukraine, and that has been a tragic abuse of the international rules-based system. But the reality is that the competition and contestation across a whole host of what I would describe domains or environments, from China, from Russia, from North Korea, and other autocratic states. And I think the challenge with those states and deterring them and encouraging them and coercing them into that international rules-based system is they don't share our ethical norms. And so the tools that they use, whether they're conventional or whether they're the more novel and innovative AI systems, will not be bound by the same regulations as we would have in the democracy, for want of another word.
So question then, thinking about that though, doesn't that give these kinds of countries a distinct advantage if they're prepared to be unethical? I'm not saying that they are, but that,
Yes, but Didi, I think it's a compelling statement, but I suppose many of your audience will have little understanding of the actions of the military. They'll see in the newspapers, and tragically, as I said, over the last 18 months, they'll have seen it very visually in Ukraine. But as I talk to, my children and my children's friends, they reflect on the actions of certainly the British and the Western military in wars that people question their validity on. I sort of try and take it back to its basics and say that the military and the security forces, which include other arms of government, whether it's the diplomatic arm or the military arm, are there to ensure that as a nation and as a collection of allies, we're able to act or credibly be prepared to act more effectively than our adversaries. So there are two parts to that which are really important. It is we've got to be able to act, to uphold our beliefs and uphold those things that we hold dear. But we've also got to be able to show that we are prepared to, both in our conviction, but also in the credible elements of our weaponry. And I think that gets to the heart of your question there, Didi, about, our adversaries don't share our ethical North Star. What I found counterintuitive is that those people that are most strident about our ethical positions and can on occasions be most strident about the tools that we might need to use to uphold those ethical positions. My view is that if you are acting against an adversary that doesn't share your ethics, so they might not be, let's take it to its most visceral and physical element. And ultimately you have to deliver violence against your adversary. If you don't share our beliefs that you absolutely have to minimize that violence to those who you've identified as an adversary, if your ethics are more broad than that, then you may not need all of the technology, in this instance, artificial intelligence and machine learning, to provide that ultimate discretion. So my response to those people that are uncomfortable about a compromise in ethics is you absolutely need the sophistication of artificial and machine learning to support human decisions to ensure that we can be more effective than our adversary.
Oh, 100%. But, and what I think is really interesting, Alex, is like, in my mind, the emergence of artificial intelligence is, and this is where ethics sits in it, effectively, it's almost like we've entered another nuclear arms race, but with artificial intelligence, right? So we have to keep up. So I do wonder at what point ethics will be abandoned in pursuit of keeping up with everyone else.
Well, I'm going to violently disagree with your final point. I'm going to come back, but I'm going to start with your first one, which is that nuclear arms race. And I absolutely agree with you. But I also, layering on top of that, think that if we're not careful, we're going to be in, using your analogy of the nuclear arms race, we're going to be in what the US nuclear strategies described in the 70s and 80s or 60s and 70s as that window of vulnerability. So, deterrence is a hugely complex and multi-layered area of debate, but fundamentally, you do not want to appear vulnerable during a period of deterrence. And I think at the moment, if we're not careful, we will end up in that window of vulnerability in exactly the same manner as you described by nuclear. I think the one thing we cannot afford to do I'm not comfortable with the phrase Western liberal democracies because it covers both people that are not completely liberal, and it also covers people that are well beyond the Western world. But let's use that phrase. If we as allies start compromising our ethics, we have sort of lost the heart of what we as nations believe in. So if we start compromising the international rules-based system, then to some extent that very position, the sort of the standard to which we uphold ourselves, and standard could be a sort of an ethereal thing, and it could be the standard to which we fight, is compromised. Now, where I agree with you is that ethics and our ethical position is organic. And you only need to look back over the last 200 years to see how humans' positions on various principles have been shaped by the actions, the intellectual thought process, and the actions of those people within the environment where violence is enacted and discussed.
So can I take it back just step to something that you were talking about before, and you were talking about somewhere in there, I think you mentioned decision making. And one of the ideas sort of that we had before also was thinking about how could AI support faster decision making? So it's not that the AI is impacting the ethics of the decisions being made, but I'm interested in your thoughts on how you think it could change the way that the information is gathered and how quickly it can be given to people who are in those situations. And then, because the ethics is like, at the end of the day, it's do we do this or don't we do this for our system of beliefs? But there's a whole system that builds that up behind the scenes that actually presents information to those who are making those decisions. And I'm wondering, sort of through the whole chain of command, how you think AI might impact that. Do you think that is that already really good? And is it, fast enough? And do you get enough information? Or do you think that's an area that AI might really be able to have some impact?
Yeah. I suppose the starting point, and we can then sort of pick on each of these elements as we go forward, is to say, hey, look, where might AI provide value in military campaigns for the benefit of defense and security? And I guess what I'll do is I'll go through the ones that are probably least contentious first, and then move to your question, David. There is no doubt, and this is where we're most comparable with the commercial sector, that there's huge value to be gained from support to defense and security. And that might be expediting procurement. It might be undertaking predictive maintenance. It could be starting managing budgets. It could be within our human resources management, whether that's recruiting, retention, pay, and training, etc. All of that is of huge value. I wouldn't try and put a hierarchy of benefit here, but I think probably least contentious to the majority of our listeners. I think the next area I would describe as combat simulation and modeling. And again, there's a breadth here, some of which might be contentious to some people, much of which won't be. There is no doubt that it is a lot easier to train against the most credible threat within a simulated environment than it is to train against it in a live environment. It is also cheaper. It is also far more effective training because you can pause, you can rerun it, you can play various options. So again, I don't think that would be a particularly contentious area. You then start moving into developing that training simulation such that you can start modeling campaigns, whether they're at a sort of an operational level or at a tactical level. And at its most sophisticated, you could do that. I mean, how do you define real time? But you could do that, what I would describe as on the fly. So you could see how an adversary acted in real time and then model how your responses might impact their actions. And that could then take you to digital twins, which could both help you in the development of your capability, etc. We're now moving into two areas that I think, David, you touched on first, which is the sort of assisting in decision-making and then moving up to the actions of weapon systems. And those weapon systems might be swarming weapon systems. So I'm sort of gradually moving through to that which would get some people most animated. There is absolutely no doubt that what a military decision maker most wants is as much information as swiftly as possible. And I think the one addition there is a desire to talk about speed of decision making and speed of information delivery. I would change that and use the word effective because I think effective, and you could add other context to this. Effective both involves the accuracy of the information you've got and the speed at which that information is delivered. And it could be that the decision you need to make because of the behaviors of your adversary requires some information as quickly as possible rather than the most accurate information that might take 5 days. There is absolutely no doubt that in both those dynamics, both accuracy and speed, the two of which are sort of two sides of the same coin, artificial intelligence can help hugely.
And that's interesting that you said that. And I had a friend who used to be in U.S. Special Forces, and he said to me the thing that they always train them to do as well, which you may recognize, which is if you have 10 seconds to make a decision, wait 10 seconds. Like, you should always be ready to make a decision, but if you can wait. Something may happen in that 10 seconds that makes you change your mind. And so there is this whole sort of thing that is like, it's good to be ready, but don't do it too quickly. Like, be ready when you need to. So I assume there's a certain amount of that as well.
There is, and I think there is the curse of the opposite, which is that, a desire to just have that last piece of information before I make that decision for action. And the reality is that generally you will never have all that information will give you is a level of uncertainty somewhere else where you would require more information. And the most dynamic and effective military campaigns have been successful because people have acted at a speed with just the right amount of information that they've got.
Here comes the glass half empty, though, Alex. Like, I wonder, and there's no question that artificial intelligence can strengthen strategic decision making because of the pace. But do you perceive as a potential vulnerability thinking about cyber attacks? And if we're reliant upon artificial intelligence for information, is that an opening for kind of adversaries to hack those systems? And I know cyber defense is a big thing, but it's just an additional layer, isn't it?
Yes, I think there is absolutely no doubt that, and David and I were talking about ChatGPT just before this started. I think there's absolutely no doubt that it would be wrong to consider that AI is a panacea to all problems. And there are sort of many reasons for that. One, your point on ethics, at the moment, the UK has made it quite clear that there will always be a human in the loop when conducting visceral, violent action that causes death. That means that AI, ML becomes a human decision aid rather than a tool of itself. I don't think I'm being too provocative by saying that could change. And I go back to my point on the reality is, if we are charged with upholding the international rules-based system against adversaries, we need to be able to act more effectively than our adversary. Tragically, that may well mean on occasions we are wrong and we do something wrong. One would hope that we are less frequently wrong. Well, we should be. AI and ML should not be used if it is more wrong than a human.
But it's like we're at an interesting moment in time, and I really like what you said there about for now, because I don't think that we can know what the future is going to hold in terms of what this technology is going to be enacted for, because I have this thing where I think about where we are at this moment in time. And like, I'm old enough, and I assume you guys are old enough too, to remember a world before the internet, and to remember our dial-up internet. And you could never have imagined where we would be today. And I think that there's been incredible good. So I wouldn't wish for that technology to, I wouldn't wish for a world without the internet. But I'm saying that along with the good has come a lot of bad too. And I think that there is a dark side, and there will be a dark side to AI, and we need to manage that quite carefully and keep our eye on it. Because we can't know. We can say right now, decisions will always be taken by humans. Well, I don't think I could have imagined in 1985 that I was going to be walking around with a phone in my pocket that was going to control my whole life. We just can't know.
Yes, that's very true. And there's a risk that by sort of moving straight on, I dismiss it. You're absolutely right that AI, that over the next few years, we will see AI used for evil. And it could be, well, so we will see AI used in a manner that we would not wish it to be used. And the reason why I sort of amplified that is because that could be it happened consciously. It could be that it happened unconsciously, not in a deliberate manner. I think where I diverge from people that know far more about AI and ML than me, although I say that I probably understand the art of war better than them, is I don't buy into a 6-month moratorium or a pause. And I think this is where the analogy with the internet falls down, because fundamentally the internet has been embraced by everyone other than those people that find it a threat. Look at the great internet wall of China, and has not been weaponized to the same level as artificial intelligence and machine learning is being discussed as being weaponized at the moment. And therefore, if we put ourselves on pause for 6 months, we opt out of the race. And we opt out of the race at the very moment when our adversaries are investing phenomenally heavily.
Yeah.
So if you then you must come back to me, but just sort of picking on a couple of comments, China's stated aim is to lead the world in artificial intelligence and machine learning by 2030. Their investment is doubling every couple of years in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Putin a couple of years ago made the statement that whoever becomes a leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. Now, I don't think that Russia is going to be a credible AI ML leader anytime soon, but China could be. So I think where your analogy with the internet in many ways is right, but is weakened in the sphere of defense and security, is that you've got an adversary that is trying to overtake you.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating whatsoever. I sound like, I'm kind of throwing buckets of water on everybody. I'm not advocating for a pause. I think the genie's out of the bottle, and if we don't keep up with our, let's call them competitors, adversaries, competitors commercially, but adversaries in terms of defense, if we don't keep up with them, we put ourselves at risk. But this is where the whole ethics thing comes back again, coming back full circle, is that, I wonder at what stage in the race, because it is a race, that in order to keep up with our adversaries, competitors in business, adversaries geopolitically, whether those ethics will be abandoned or have to be abandoned, as a result of the pace at which this technology is advancing. And we can't know that, I don't think.
No, I'm really glad you used that final phrase, because I think as we develop so firstly, I think when I talk about adversaries, I talk about adversaries exactly as you described halfway through there, which is adversaries in the geopolitical and the geostrategic world, because anyone that serves in the military or in the security agencies believes that they serve for that purpose rather than serving solely for the delivering violence. And if we, I'm old enough to remember the Cold War and then the end of the Cold War, and we spent a huge amount of time working with the Russian Navy. They had a different approach to democracy to us, but they were moving from adversaries, and tragically they've moved back again. So I think any military officer or any serving or retired military service man or woman would say that actually it's the geopolitics that we got an issue with. But I got slightly digressed. Didi, I think the point on ethics is compelling. I would say that as we develop our AI tools to support defense, then those AI tools need to be able to act in a manner that we aren't prepared for them to act at the moment, but may need them to act if we are to, and I go back to the statement I made previously, if we ultimately are required to act in a manner that's more effective than our adversary, and our adversary has got those tools. That was a slightly awkward statement, but I think the bottom line is that it will be too late if our adversary has chosen to be aggressive and has got tools that act more swiftly than we can. So we need those tools, but we absolutely need a level of control over them commensurate with the laws and the rules and the policies that we have at the time.
And do you think AI is going to make us, this is a really base question, but do you think that AI makes us, thinking about it in terms of the military and in terms of defense, does it make the world a safer place or does it make the world a scarier place?
It's a very binary question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is impossible to answer. To some extent, your question is, Alex, would I prefer a world with or without AI?
That's it, Alex. You got it in one.
And the answer is that on the balance of probabilities, I would prefer a world with AI. And again, this is where I move well out of my area of expertise. The reality is that AI has got the opportunity of delivering so much good to the world that what should happen, and I think we will get there, what should happen is we end up with an element of governance and regulation and Cold War-esque approach to AI in the military and the defense in the military and defense sphere. And I hesitate to go back to your analogy with nuclear, but I do think there are some parallels there. The reality is that nuclear has delivered a huge amount of good, both inside and outside defense. But once invented, it kind of can't be uninvented.
Yes, agreed.
That's literally where I was going to go with it, because I was going to loop back around and say, because you mentioned that we all lived, we did all live through the Cold War and all of that stuff, sort of back in the 80s. And I remember it clearly. And I do think we'll probably end up in a similar situation where it's maybe somebody will use it once, sort of, the US famously, actually used a nuclear bomb or two. And then everybody else went, okay, we can not do that again. And I think there was a big consensus, and maybe the same thing will happen. Maybe we'll see, one country will use some sort of AI in one situation. And then I think everybody might realize and go, okay, we all just need to calm down. And, it'll turn into this sort of threat and a Cold War type situation where we all know that we've all got it and we all know that we can use it, but nobody actually will, because everybody's afraid as soon as you set it loose, then everybody loses. And I guess it's the same thing. I mean, I know we've come back to a situation where, we don't specifically want to talk about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine at the minute, but, there is this sort of existential threat in the background that, Putin might use nuclear weapons again. And, would they be like small tactical ones where he's trying to just, take over one location, or, would that lead to some sort of global thing? And I just get the feeling that AI is going to, in the defense realm, I think it might end up being the same sort of a situation where we just end up in a massive Cold War about it.
And this is where I think I share DD's glass half empty. I think that the nuclear analogy has flaws in both its temporal context and the makeup of AI compared to a nuclear bomb. So in the temporal context, I think that, and again, no historian, there'll be listeners that will be busy ranting at the screen when they hear this. But
hopefully,
I think we know we've got a far more global environment than we had at the end of the Cold War, at the end of the Second World War, and moving into the Cold War. So the ability for information transfer was not nearly in the same manner as it is now. And the construct around nuclear control occurred within that environment and have somehow sustained themselves. And I think it's amazing that they have, but have somehow concerned. I think that the cost of entry is significantly different to a nuclear weapon, to an AI tool. And I think that plays on my final point, which is a nuclear weapon is a physical thing. An AI tool can be hired for the hour with a level of sort of plausible deniability. So I can see a situation where Russia might not be ready to use some of the AI tools that it has, or China might not be ready to use some of the AI tools that it has right now, but might be prepared to pass some to non-state actor or a state to play with. I'm sort of riffing on my feet here, but I think that I have less confidence, David, than you do, that there'll be an element of early control over AI.
And it's the kind of stuff, that people, I think it's like worth kind of thinking about the kind of scenarios that really scare people, okay? Which may not be the scenarios that are in your mind, Alex, but when people imagine the deployment of artificial intelligence within the military, they're imagining things like no humans making decisions, like the robots taking over the world, drones descending and killing everybody, and a complete lack of control. And I don't think that's right now. But I mean, I think it's worth noting that that's what kind of the public temperature is around this, and it is really, really extreme, and things could get to that point if we don't act with caution. I'm not saying they will, but they could.
I think this is the point made by the very, very educated and intellectual team who said, pause on AI. And I think I merely go back to the statement that I made earlier, which is, any country that enforces a moratorium, or group of countries, opts out of the race because we know it's been a stated aim by those people that don't share our beliefs, and that they want to have superiority in this environment. So the sort of environment, those sort of H.G. Wells Independence Day environment that you described, DD, is an environment that I can foresee some of our adversaries would choose to develop. We have no choice but to need to respond to that.
Well, I got Alex to agree with me. I'm so pleased. Okay, and on the optimistic view, let's say that the whole world plays nice. I doubt that's going to happen. The whole world plays nice. What are the potential beneficial outputs for us as a country in terms of, and for the world, in fact, in terms of, kind of global safety and global unity, and what does AI offer up for that?
So I think even if the whole world doesn't play nice, where I think I sort of share some of David's views is that this is going to be this is a voyage of discovery. What tends to happen is you get an odd spark and you abut, and people learn the sort of behaviors and the protocols. So I think bad things will happen. I think that things will go wrong on our side. We'll make mistakes and we'll learn from them. And I can see a situation over the next 5 years where there is the two adversaries, two contestants bump up against each other, and AI is used, and people walk away and go, whoa, hang on a second, we need to talk about that before that happens again.
Will we even know?
Go on, sir.
Will we even know? This is presuming that people know that AI will be used in one of those conflicts. Will we even have, we as the general public, will we even have any idea that AI was potentially used in the background? Or do you think will this be something that's sort of, like, there's a lot of technology that defense uses that nobody knows anything about, and intelligence uses that nobody knows anything about. And I get the feeling that what's going to happen is, if it isn't already being used in anger, it will be, but no one will have any idea that it was. And what would have to happen for us to actually realize that AI was being used? And do you think anybody would admit to it, even if it was?
I mean, lots of questions there. I mean, I think to your first point, David, that there are a whole host of weapons and behaviors and actions that governments use that they don't share with their citizens, and that is a contract between governments and citizens, where governments are elected to keep the citizens safe, and within the boundaries of legality they use them. So I think there's every chance that we will not know, but equally, you only need to look at the extraordinary work of organizations like Bellingcat to know that there will be a whole host of investigators out there to, when something goes wrong, to establish what that was and why. I think what I would hope, and all of my engagement since leaving and my understanding whilst I was serving, is that at the heart of our development of AI ML, and when I say our, it's, our allies and us, is a drive for explainability, for an audit trail. And that's for several reasons. One, so that we can learn from mistakes, because mistakes will be made, and the tool can become more effective. And that more effective is both sides of the divide, really, isn't it? It is making sure that if we have to kill the bad guy, then we kill the bad guy. And it is also making sure that we kill fewer or none of the neutral or the good guys. So we absolutely need explainability for that reason. And also because we ultimately will need to, whether it is to government, whether it is to overseers, or whether it's to the general public, be able to justify our actions.
Yep.
Don't ask me to go off about the Cold War and everything, because I this is the thing. I've got university. Yeah, I've got university age children, and my son is studying politics and international relations, and we spent our whole life kind of talking about geopolitics. And he's 21 and he thinks he knows everything, and he might know more than me after all. But I was trying to explain to him that when I was growing up, it felt so real. The threat to, and I was growing up in Canada, but it felt so real. I remember we used to go to bed every night thinking the Russians were going to nuke us. And it feels like, and I don't know if this is the constant barrage of information that young people are exposed to through social media and the internet and technology, and it's like fast, hard news all the time, that they don't kind of take these threats seriously, like everybody thinks that, it's just saber rattling. Oh, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to escalate because they're consuming that information all of the time. Whereas my stance is like, I'm always like, the end is nigh every time something happens, which David can attest to. So I think the military is incredibly important. And I think that anything that's going to, although I'm very cautious where artificial intelligence is concerned, anything that's going to make our defense, our military, and our safety more effective, I'm for it. Even if there's a risk of Independence Day, Alex.
I think there's one area that has changed. There's a couple of dynamics that have changed dramatically since the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, and the military call these domains or environments. During the Cold War, we had the land, we had air, and we had sea. And, near the end of it, you had space, but it was pretty uncontested. Where we've got a real challenge now is that what I describe as global commons. So the global commons are, the sea, cyberspace, space, and Antarctica. And let's ignore Antarctica for a moment, because it's, I think, quite unique. The sea, the regulation around the sea, the international laws of the sea have been upheld by largely nations similar to ourselves, but have been accepted by the rest of the world and adapted, but over hundreds and hundreds of years. And it is quite extraordinary that we sit here now and the vast majority of the globe is owned by no one. And the same with the internet. It is a global common, and the same with space. Space is a global common. Now, we set a set of rules and protocols around the sea, and we set a set of rules and protocols around the internet, and there were some rules and protocols around space. The challenge with space and cyberspace is action there happens at the speed of light, and so I think this is a challenge that many people find difficult to immediately associate with. You've got something that is owned by no one, and therefore anyone, people can act on it, and people can start forming different rules, which is what China is doing in both space and in the internet. And once those different rules are formed, we are bound by them because the decisions happen at the speed of light. Whereas that wasn't the case with the sea. The sea is bound by the physics of nature. So I think that the reason why we should be so seized by the risks and the benefits associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and let's come on later to quantum, is because there are a collection of commons that are coming of age at the moment, particularly space and cyberspace. They're coming of age at the moment, and the rules that we would want there are at risk because there are players that believe in very different systems to us. And the consequence of that can happen at the speed of light.
The speed of light in the Wild West, Alex.
The speed of light in space. I love it. Yeah, we didn't even touch on quantum. And I feel like that's a whole separate topic. Because if you add quantum into the AI that we have at the minute, and then you start saying, well, okay, what's going to be the next big step in AI? Well, it's going to be quantum, because as soon as you can get AI running on quantum, that's a whole different kettle of fish, because you can then process so much more data so much faster and in so many different ways. That's going to be a massive game changer. And I'm not sure how far away we are from that. Actually, it has come up in a couple of conferences that I've been to lately. So I'm just wondering, it might be interesting to get somebody on, I think, the podcast later who's a quantum expert to really come and talk to us about what's the state of quantum at the minute and how do they think about, the migration of AI off of normal server systems that we have at the minute onto some sort of a quantum system. And that I think that's the next major step change. And I don't know how far away we are from that at the minute.
And David, I don't know either, and I wouldn't even. I mean, if any point you talk to, you get different answers. So I'm not going to try and forecast it. I just sort of offer one reflection. It gets back to our sort of analogy with nuclear. My worry about quantum when it turns up, unlike a nuclear bomb, you can't hire out a nuclear bomb to give to a third party, whether that's a state or a non-state actor, to exploit, either for deterrence or action. Once you have a quantum computer, you can hire out that quantum. You could hire out that quantum computer for use by whoever might want to use it. And I think that brings some very, very scary conclusions and possible futures, both within the military, the financial, the fabric of every fabric of state.
All I'm seeing in my mind is Bond villains. You know this, yeah?
Yeah.
Quantum computer.
Yeah. When you can get quantum on AWS, then anybody can get access to it. And anyone with an idea will be able to go in and make something that could potentially destroy everything.
Yeah.
Which is a slightly sobering thought. I'm not sure we want to end on that one. Any final thoughts? Maybe glass half full, positive, reinforcing, so we can leave the conversation feeling good about ourselves and where we think we're going in the future?
What autocratic states dislike most of all is a collection of allies. Is that which actually quite extraordinarily over the last 50, 60 years, 70 years, we have created not just around the Euro-Atlantic alliance of NATO, but elsewhere within the Asia Pacific. That is the biggest challenge to autocracies. What will be, I think, most exciting as we move forward with artificial intelligence and machine learning is how those states work together. And I think it will be a really organic relationship of aligned purposes and how they work together how they share data, how they share AI/ML tools, because that will be how we can sustain or regain an advantage in some areas. And that will be the only way that we're able to stand up against states that have a fused civil and military industrial base, that have far more open data regulation, which enables them to feed their tools in a far greater manner, and a significant budget. So I think that if I was to end on one thing, it wouldn't be the technology, but the excitement I have around the building of aligned allies, not just in the sort of traditional areas of Euro-Atlantic, but elsewhere in the globe.
Thank you very much.
Alex Burton, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
Fantastic
Indeed.
discussion.
David, thank you.
I think at some point in the future, I'm anticipating, and this is something I said to Didi earlier this morning, I'm anticipating that something massive is going to happen that's going to come out in the news. And we may want to come back to you at some point in the future and say, what do you think about this? So if you're open to that, that would be great. Okay, folks, that's a wrap on another amazing episode of Creatives with AI. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. If you want to stay up to date on how all things related to AI is impacting the creative industries, then be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever your favorite platform is. We're on them all. And follow us on social media. We're on mainly Twitter and LinkedIn, but we're the same handle everywhere, which is @Creatives with AI. We'd also really appreciate it if you could just take a minute to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those are our two main platforms, and it really helps other listeners find the show, and it also helps us get more popularity and more exposure. So it'd be amazing if you could help us with that. If you've got any questions, topic suggestions, guest recommendations, feel free to send us an email. The best email is hello@creativeswith.ai, or you can shoot us a message on social media. Either one is fine. We love hearing from all of you, and we can't wait to bring more exciting episodes in the future. And the best way we can do that is to get feedback from the audience and have the audience tell us who it is you'd like to hear from and what things you'd like us to ask and what topics you'd like us to talk about. So please use that. Let us know what you want to hear, and we'll do our best to get it for you. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, Futurehand Limited, who make this podcast possible. Your support means the world to us, and we really appreciate it. So thanks very much. That's it for today. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay curious.